Can you talk about the Clinton era and their role in kind of deregulating these industries and how that led to a lot of the dynamics you're talking about? And there are a lot of people who I don't agree with, but they claim that nuclear power is the future, right? I do not see that as a sustainable energy source. How also that kind of plays into the future of these conversations as well.
Yeah, so I'll talk about deregulation first, which is a very complicated word when it comes to electricity, and I won't pretend to be the expert on it. But basically, what the push for deregulation did, which took off really in the 1990s, most sort of aggressively under the Clinton administration, and was kind of a state by state project, was in the most charitable reading, to break up big investor-owned utilities. So before these sort of waves of deregulation, in the states that ended up doing it, investor-owned utilities made the power, they own the transmission lines, and they distributed the power. So there was no one else really to blame, right? If you were in the service area of one of these big integrated utilities, your whole, top to bottom, from where the power came from to how it got to turn your lights on, that was from the same person. And so that created sort of perverse incentives for companies to generate as much power as possible, to sell much more power. And so what deregulation did was to open different parts of that up to competition, in every sort of, there's a lot packed into words like competition and wanting to enforce market discipline, as was said in some places, so that you had different actors coming in to run different parts of that process. So from generation, making the power, to transmission lines, to distribution. In Texas, that process happened more extremely than it happened almost anywhere else. So you have different power companies in different places, and people sort of choose those based on essentially a set of rate schemes. So, I live in New York. I get my power from Con Ed. I, can choose to have it distributed by different places, but generally the wires are from Con Ed. If you live in Texas, that is a just much more open process. And so what could happen now, because wholesale power prices are peaking, is that people could get struck with sort of outrageous bills at the end of the month. And that could vary based on which company you believed basically was going to offer you the best rate, which, if you're not paying that much attention to this, or just don't have the time to sort of choose one that you think will be trustworthy, could just leave people with sort of outrageous bills. And I think that's, we haven't seen exactly how much of that will happen, but I think that's coming down the pike and could be really scary for some people. But, the other thing that deregulation did sort of most infamously is just create middlemen, right, in this process. And so the most famous of those is Enron, which, cooked up all these schemes that led to rolling blackouts in California by sort of strategically withholding power from different places and sort of driving up the price. And they just got enormous sums off of that. So that's obviously horrible, right? Enron was, Ken Lay went to jail. People were arrested. The company folded. But there are the sort of nuts of that system still sort of exist in different ways. And so what somebody told me recently, who has studied Enron and the sort of deregulation process, was that Ken Lay got everything he wanted in Texas after he was put in jail and after he died, and that is the system that Texas is living with today.
That's insanity. And just your views on nuclear power in terms of the future of like renewable energy as a discussion. It's a little bit of an aside, but nuclear power, those facilities were also frozen in Texas.
Yeah, a little less so I think than the thermal energy, the fossil fuel power. I mean, I'm a bit agnostic on nuclear power, I will say. I mean, I think probably the wrong move from a decarbonization perspective is to shut it all down immediately. But I don't think it's the future, right? I think there are real boosters of nuclear power who will say that's the only thing we need. That's all we can do. I think there's a real debate as to how long different plants should stay online to sort of make up the picture of low carbon energy. But I certainly don't think it's the future, just based on, it's massively expensive and these plants fail and we haven't figured out a good solution for where to put nuclear waste. So I think it's a real debate, but I'm not as bullish certainly as some other people are.
There are a lot of bulls in that debate. But Kate, I want to thank you so much for your time. This was really fascinating. Kate Aronoff, and her piece in the New Republic is entitled "Conservatives Are Seriously Accusing Wind Turbines of Killing People in the Texas Blackouts." And I saw that you have a book coming out in a few months. Can you talk about that quickly before we let you go?
Of course, yeah. The book is called Overheated: How Capitalism Broke the Planet and How We Fix It, which is coming out on April 20th, 2021. And it looks, I have a chapter about many of the things we've just been talking about the power sector, but basically looks at how neoliberalism and centuries of anti-democratic thinking took the most reasonable solutions for dealing with the climate crisis off the table, and then spend a lot of time talking about how we can put them back on the table, hopefully to take on this crisis.
Thank you so much, Kate, for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much. Great to be here.